You were taught to believe you think for yourself, that your choices are yours, that your morals, your tastes, your opinions came from somewhere pure inside you. But what if they didn't? What if almost every decision you've ever made was planted, not by force, but by suggestion? Manipulation doesn't always break the door. It knocks gently, wearing a smile, speaking in the language of comfort. It says, "Trust me, you're safe here," and you open your mind before you even realize it's happening. You see, control in our world no longer looks like tyranny. It looks like kindness, belonging, approval. The greatest prison is not built with bars. It's built with the fear of standing alone. Most people will never see the strings pulling them, because to see them means losing the illusion of freedom they've spent a lifetime protecting. But you're not most people. You're here, searching for truth, no matter how dark it is. And for that, you deserve something real. So before we go further, listen closely. On DarkPhilsy, you don't get comfort, you get clarity. You don't escape the shadows, you learn to command them. Subscribe and step outside the illusion. The unseen architects. There are forces shaping you right now that you cannot see. Not mystical ones, but human ones. Since the moment you first learned the word good, someone has been teaching you how to serve, how to seek approval, how to measure your worth by the comfort you give to others. They were not villains, they were architects. Parents, teachers, mentors, lovers, all carrying blueprints they themselves inherited. And every lesson they taught was carved from fear. Be polite. Don't question. Fit in. These weren't instructions for peace. They were instructions for control. The system never needed you to think, only to comply beautifully. It rewards obedience with belonging and punishes awareness with exile. That's why truth seekers always look lonely. They've seen behind the curtain, where the smiling faces meet the machine. Human manipulation doesn't start in adulthood. It starts with the first time a child is made to feel loved only when they behave. That's the moment the leash is fastened. Invisible, but permanent. As we grow, the architects change, but the script remains. The teacher becomes the boss, the parent becomes the partner, the approval becomes currency, and the fear of rejection becomes the tax you pay for being accepted. But here's the irony. The manipulators don't always know they're doing it. They're puppets, pulling strings, repeating the same choreography of control handed down through centuries. Civilizations rise and fall on this cycle. Teach obedience, reward conformity, punish truth. Religion did it with guilt. Politics does it with outrage. Corporations do it with dreams of comfort. All whispering the same sacred lie. We know what's best for you. And when you believe it, you stop noticing that every choice you make has already been predicted, tested, and designed. Modern manipulation is elegant. It doesn't need soldiers. It needs psychologists. It doesn't silence you. It distracts you until you silence yourself. Every headline, every trend, every debate, it isn't random noise. It's a net, a psychological architecture built to harvest your focus and to make you believe that obedience is virtue. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that's why truth is feared. Because the moment you understand how deeply you've been molded, you can no longer be shaped by the same hands. The architects lose their power the instant their designs are exposed. The psychology of submission. Control does not survive through force alone. It survives because people invite it in, because submission, in its quietest form, feels safe. Most people don't want freedom. Freedom is heavy. It demands responsibility, isolation, and the courage to think without applause. So instead, they choose comfort. The kind of comfort that comes wrapped in authority and validation. Manipulators know this. They don't need to chain you. They just need to make you want their approval. The rest happens automatically. Watch how easily people bend to avoid disapproval. How they edit their words, their tone, their entire truth just to stay liked. That's the first stage of submission, when your authenticity becomes negotiable. It begins subtly. Someone praises you for being calm while they provoke you. They smile when you suppress your instincts, and you learn not through logic, but through emotion, that suppression earns you peace. Soon, you start policing yourself. That is the manipulator's greatest victory, when you become your own guard. The human mind is built to seek connection, and the manipulator studies that instinct like a hunter studies breath. They don't conquer your will, they mimic your desires. They give you exactly what you need to feel seen, and then they withdraw it until you chase. It's not love, it's leverage. It's why the most dangerous manipulators often appear kind. They're experts in the currency of reassurance. They know how to give just enough warmth to keep you dependent on their approval. They test your empathy, your patience, your silence, because once they know your breaking point, they own the space between your reactions. And you begin to believe that control equals care, that dominance means safety, that obedience is love. But it's all theater, a psychological choreography where guilt is the spotlight and your longing for harmony is the script. Most people would rather be emotionally controlled than emotionally alone. They'll call it partnership, loyalty, morality, but it's submission disguised as virtue. That's why truth-tellers are always accused of cruelty. Because the moment you stop submitting, you stop playing the role the manipulator wrote for you. And to them, that feels like betrayal. In reality, it's the first step toward freedom. The hardest truth to accept is that submission is seductive. It promises you relief from thinking, from choosing, from conflict. But every time you surrender for peace, you lose a little more of your power to exist as yourself. And once you give that away, the manipulator doesn't need to control you anymore. You'll do it for them. The gentle hand that controls you. The most dangerous manipulators never raise their voice. They don't threaten, they don't demand, they simply care. Their control is tender. It sounds like concern. It feels like love. They learn your wounds, the hidden ones, the ones you try to hide even from yourself. And they offer healing, but only under their conditions. At first, it feels divine. Someone finally understands you. They listen, they comfort, they promise safety. You think you've found peace, but peace was never the goal. Possession was. They feed your loneliness just enough warmth to make you dependent on their presence. Every comfort becomes a transaction. Every act of care, an investment with invisible interest. And when the bill comes due, it's paid not in money, but in silence, obedience, and guilt. They won't say, "You owe me." They'll say, "After everything I've done for you, That's how the gentle hand tightens, not through pain, but through memory. You start editing yourself around them, avoiding certain words, certain emotions, trying not to disappoint their version of you. That's not love. That's conditioning. True love expands your soul. False love shapes it to fit another's comfort. And yet, most people won't see it, because being controlled feels safer than being misunderstood. They'll mistake manipulation for emotional depth, mistake dependency for connection. They'll call it loyalty. The gentle manipulator never argues. They make you argue with yourself. You'll hear their voice in your head long after they've gone silent, because the real prison is internalized. It's the voice that says, "Don't upset them. They didn't mean to. Maybe it's your fault." That's how control sustains itself, through your empathy. They weaponize your goodness, turning compassion into compliance. You think you're being kind, but really you're being trained. And when you finally begin to notice it, they'll sense it instantly. They'll shift the script. They'll become the victim, and you become the ungrateful one. That's how masterful emotional control is. It makes you feel guilty for reclaiming your freedom. But the moment you see the pattern, the invisible exchange of comfort for compliance, you begin to detach. And detachment, though painful, is the beginning of liberation. You don't need to hate them. You don't need revenge. You only need clarity. Because clarity is the one thing a manipulator cannot survive. The mirror of desire. Every act of manipulation begins with a mirror. Not the kind that reflects your face, the kind that reflects your hunger. The manipulator studies you the way an artist studies light. They listen, they nod, they observe your smallest reactions. What softens you, what excites you, what you crave when you think no one is watching. And then, with exquisite precision, they become it. They mirror your values, your speech, even your wounds. They transform into the perfect companion, the one who understands you, who finishes your thoughts, who finally gives your loneliness a name that sounds like destiny. It feels divine, doesn't it? As if the universe conspired to send you someone who just gets you. But it isn't fate, it's data. Every manipulator is a collector of emotional information. They build a version of themselves out of your desires. You don't fall in love with them. You fall in love with your own reflection, polished and performed back to you with surgical empathy. That's why it feels magnetic, because you're not connecting with another soul, you're connecting with your own ideal. The manipulator knows this and keeps feeding the illusion until your attachment becomes automatic. They'll echo your beliefs, your humor, your sadness, not because they share them, but because sameness creates trust. Sameness quiets the part of you that warns something's off. It silences instinct, and once instinct is gone, obedience follows quietly. Soon you stop asking questions. You start defending them. You interpret their absence as your fault, their coldness as your challenge. You confuse emotional turbulence with depth. That's the mirror's second layer, projection. They let you project goodness onto them, so you never see the void underneath. You fill in the blanks with hope, and hope becomes the leash that keeps you returning. But here's the paradox. The manipulator isn't powerful because they control you. They're powerful because they convince you to control yourself in the name of love, loyalty, or purpose. They'll say, "I never asked you to change," while their silence demands it. They'll call you strong just before testing how much humiliation your strength can hide. And when you break, they'll whisper, "See, I was right about you." That's not love, that's orchestration. Every mirror they hold has a crack running through it, a faint distortion you'll notice only when you stop admiring your reflection. It's in the way their empathy disappears the moment you need it, the way their support feels conditional, the way their presence always comes with an agenda. When you finally see it, the illusion shatters, and what you thought was chemistry reveals itself as choreography. This is where most people retreat. They'd rather cling to the illusion of love than confront the reality of manipulation, because to admit you were mirrored feels like admitting you were naive. But you weren't naive. You were human. You were honest enough to believe in connection. They simply weaponized that belief. So remember this: a true bond is not built on mirroring, but on friction, on difference, on truth. If someone agrees with you too completely, too quickly, look closer. You might be staring into a mirror polished by someone who profits from your reflection.
The age of collective control. There was a time when control meant chains and soldiers. Today, it means notifications and beliefs. You no longer need to be imprisoned when your mind can be guided. The new manipulators don't threaten your body, they curate your perception. They know what you'll desire before you do. They don't need to hide, they need only to entertain you. Every scroll, every headline, every argument online is part of a great experiment. How much outrage will make you click? How much fear will make you compliant? How much validation will make you addicted? The algorithm doesn't control you, it studies you. It watches how your emotions pulse in real time, and it learns your rhythm better than your friends ever could. Then, it serves you exactly what keeps you inside the loop. Anger, disguised as engagement. Comfort, disguised as connection. Distraction, disguised as purpose. That's how modern control works. It doesn't punish rebellion. It dissolves it in entertainment. It replaces curiosity with convenience, depth with dopamine, truth with narrative. And the scariest part is, you participate willingly. The system flatters you into obedience. It tells you you're an individual, that your opinions are sacred, that you're on the right side. But every side was built by someone selling attention. Every belief system is a brand. The ancient rulers used religion. The modern ones use identity. They whisper to your ego, not your soul. They tell you that virtue is outrage, that righteousness is belonging, that your anger is a badge of enlightenment. And you believe it, because it feels good to belong to something bigger. That's how the collective trap closes, not through control of information, but through control of emotion. People aren't forced to obey anymore. They perform obedience proudly. They shout their loyalty, their virtue, their side, not realizing that both sides serve the same structure: division. Divide the people, and you never have to chain them. Make them fight over symbols, and they'll forget who printed them. Make them crave visibility, and they'll hand over their privacy. Make them love convenience, and they'll stop asking who profits from it. The manipulators of our time don't need to hide behind thrones. They sit on screens, wrapped in light. They sell you the idea of freedom while monitoring your every choice, and you thank them for it. Every ad, every trending topic, every viral outrage is a message designed not to inform, but to calibrate your emotions, to keep you predictable. Because unpredictability, true independence of thought, is bad for business. Even morality has been weaponized. Every cause, every movement, every declaration of justice is another emotional hook in disguise. The system doesn't care what you believe, only that you believe passionately enough to keep the machine alive. And that's the real brilliance of collective control. It turns manipulation into self-expression. You'll defend the very illusions that enslave you because they make you feel righteous. This is not chaos, it's design. When Nietzsche said, "Madness is rare in individuals, but in groups it is the rule," he wasn't mocking humanity, he was warning it. The crowd is always easier to guide than the soul. And yet, the moment you step back, the moment you stop reacting, stop reposting, stop shouting, you begin to see the pattern. You begin to remember yourself. That silence you feel when you disconnect, that's not emptiness. That's freedom trying to breathe again. When morality becomes a cage, there is no prison more elegant than the one built from good intentions. The manipulator knows this, that guilt controls better than fear ever could. Fear fades when the threat is gone, but guilt lingers. It stays even when you're safe, because it convinces you that you are the problem. This is the turning point in human manipulation, when the architecture of control no longer needs chains because your own conscience does the work. It begins innocently. You're told to be good, to be kind, to be fair. But soon, goodness is defined for you. Kindness is used against you. Fairness becomes a leash. And suddenly, you're afraid to think differently. That's how morality becomes a cage. When virtue is dictated by others, it ceases to be moral. It becomes performance, a currency of validation traded for belonging. The manipulator understands this perfectly. They don't argue facts, they argue feelings. They don't demand obedience, they convince you that disobedience makes you bad. They weaponize your goodness until it becomes self-censorship. And the more moral you believe you are, the easier you are to control. This is how the softest souls become the easiest targets. They're so afraid of causing pain that they allow themselves to be reshaped by guilt. But morality without self-awareness is submission in disguise. It turns compassion into duty, duty into fear, and fear into control. Every tyrant, every manipulator, every zealot claims moral high ground. They never say, "I want power." They say, "I want what's right." It's the perfect disguise, because who dares to question someone claiming virtue. To challenge them is to risk being called heartless, cruel, or lost. That's why Nietzsche warned that the most dangerous men are not the wicked, but the good, when they are certain of their goodness. For certainty breeds blindness. When a manipulator controls your sense of right and wrong, they no longer need to control your behavior. You'll police yourself, editing your thoughts before they even form, avoiding truths that might disturb the illusion of virtue. And so morality becomes a script, a theater of purity where truth is forbidden if it threatens the play. But real morality is not comfort. It's confrontation. It demands courage, the courage to question even your own goodness. When you say, "I'm a good person," pause and ask, by whose definition? Because every system, every ideology, every manipulator wants to define good in a way that benefits them. Some call obedience good. Some call silence respect. Some call ignorance peace. But goodness without awareness is submission painted gold. And this is how entire societies stay asleep. People obey not because they're weak, but because they think obedience is noble. They defend their own manipulation because it feels morally right to do so. True morality doesn't demand obedience. It demands consciousness. It's not a leash, it's a compass. And to hold it firmly, you must be willing to walk alone through the noise of the crowd, carrying your own sense of truth, even when it offends others. Because morality, when born from truth, liberates. But morality shaped by manipulation enslaves. Quietly, beautifully, permanently. So ask yourself not, "Am I good?" but whose voice defines my goodness? Only then does the cage begin to rust. Only then can you see that the bars were never morality itself. They were the hands that taught you to fear your own shadow. The breaking of the spell. There comes a moment, quiet, almost invisible, when the illusion begins to crack. It's not dramatic. It's not fire or thunder. It's a whisper. A feeling that something you believed in no longer fits. You start noticing things. How certain people only listen when they're being admired. How apologies sound rehearsed. How comfort begins to feel like control. And suddenly the world you thought you knew shifts beneath your feet. You see patterns where there used to be innocence. You see motives behind kindness, scripts behind sincerity. You begin to see the spell. It's terrifying. Because to see manipulation clearly is to realize how often you've participated in it, not just as the victim, but as the echo. Every time you stayed silent to keep the peace, every time you flattered someone for safety, every time you pretended not to see the lie, you strengthened the spell. That's the hardest truth of all. We are both the manipulated and the manipulator. We inherit the language of control from a world that rewards it. But awakening doesn't mean guilt. It means ownership. It's the first breath after drowning, the pain of air filling lungs that forgot how to expand. Freedom doesn't feel glorious. It feels empty at first, because the noise that used to fill your life wasn't meaning, it was distraction. When you stop reacting to every emotional tug, the silence can feel unbearable. You'll want to go back to the comfort of certainty, the warmth of illusion, the blindness that once felt like love. But don't. Stay with the silence. Stay with the ache. Because that emptiness is not loss, it's clarity. Every manipulator depends on your confusion. They survive in the fog between what you feel and what you see. The moment the fog lifts, their power dissolves. You begin to understand the pattern, to predict the test before it begins, to hear the tone in a voice that once disarmed you. And in that awareness, something shifts. You stop reacting. You start observing. And observation is power. You don't need confrontation. You don't need revenge. Awareness itself is rebellion. Because the manipulator feeds on your participation, your arguments, your apologies, your guilt. When you stop feeding them, they starve. This is where most people falter. They expect awakening to make them stronger, but it makes you softer first. You start to feel everything, the lies, the fear, the wasted years. It hurts, but it's the kind of pain that cleanses. Like light flooding a dark room, it stings the eyes before it saves the soul. And as the light grows, you realize something else. The manipulator wasn't your greatest enemy. Your attachment to illusion was. The need to believe in people who never earned your belief. The hunger to be loved, even by those who used love as a weapon. When you see that, the spell is broken. You no longer need to prove, to beg, to fix, to understand. You simply step out of the game. That is real freedom. Not control, not dominance, just presence. You start living not as a reaction, but as a choice. And that's something no manipulator can touch. Because once you've seen the strings, you can never again be the puppet.
The price of awareness. Awareness is the most expensive form of freedom. It costs the illusions that once made you feel safe. It costs the crowd, the comfort, and the warmth of belonging to a story you no longer believe in. The moment you see manipulation clearly, you start to see it everywhere. In faces you love, in systems you trusted, in the small negotiations that fill your days. It's a strange kind of loneliness, not isolation from others, but separation from their illusions. You stop fitting in because you stop pretending. And that silence between you and the world, that's the sound of truth creating distance. You'll miss the simplicity of ignorance, the ease of taking people at their word, the luxury of believing every smile. But awareness takes that luxury away. It doesn't make you cynical, it makes you precise. You begin to see how easily people trade honesty for harmony, and how often love is just a mirror for control. You'll start speaking less, not because you're afraid, but because you realize how little needs to be said. You'll listen differently too. You'll hear the tone beneath the words, the intent behind the kindness, the subtle shift in energy when truth enters the room. It's not paranoia, it's perception. Awareness sharpens the soul. It cuts through the layers of performance that keep the world comfortable. But that sharpness also draws blood. You'll lose people who need you to be predictable, who need your silence to protect their stories. You'll lose the version of yourself that needed their approval. And in that loss, you'll begin to find peace. Because the price of awareness is high, but the cost of ignorance is your soul. You cannot unsee what's been revealed. You cannot unknow what truth has shown you. But you can learn to live differently, not in bitterness, but in clarity. You begin to see manipulation not as evil, but as a symptom of fear, of hunger, of the human desire to control what we don't understand. And in that understanding, you stop hating the manipulators. You outgrow them. You no longer need to expose or destroy them because you realize they can only harm those who still seek validation. You don't need to play their game anymore. You simply step outside the board. Freedom isn't loud, it's subtle. It's the ability to sit in stillness without craving applause or explanation. When you reach that point, you stop reacting to manipulation altogether because your peace is no longer negotiable. You can walk through deception without absorbing it. You can witness control without surrendering. You can love without being owned. And you can say no without explaining why. That's the true reward of awareness, not power, but sovereignty. You realize the world will keep spinning in its chaos. People will keep playing games of dominance, pretending they're cages or kingdoms. And yet, you will walk among them untouched, not superior, just awake. You will still feel, you will still love, but your love will have boundaries, and your empathy will have discipline. Because wisdom without protection is just another form of weakness, and clarity without courage is just observation. So when you feel the weight of awareness pressing on your chest, remember that pressure is transformation. You are becoming the kind of mind the world cannot easily deceive, the kind of soul manipulation cannot seduce, the kind of human who walks freely, not because the world became honest, but because you did. You've just seen what most people never will. If this truth resonated with you, hold it close, but don't keep it silent. Share it. Let someone else see what you now see. And remember, this is only the beginning.
DarkPhilsy. Decode shadows. Unlock wisdom. Shape your life.